Jake rubbed his tired eyes as he drove down the quiet highway. It was almost 3 in the morning, and after 12 hours at the hospital, all he wanted was to get home and sleep. The road stretched empty ahead of him, lit only by his headlights cutting through the darkness. He'd been working as a paramedic for 8 years now, and these late-night drives home had become routine. That's when he saw her. At first, Jake thought his exhausted mind was playing tricks on him. There, stumbling along the side of the road, was a figure in white. As his truck got closer, the image became clearer and more shocking. It was a young woman wearing what looked like a wedding dress, but not the kind you'd see in magazines. This dress was torn, dirty, and stained. The woman was barefoot, and even from his truck, Jake could see she was struggling to walk. Jake's paramedic training kicked in immediately. He pulled over to the shoulder, hazard lights flashing, and jumped out of his truck. The woman looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes that reminded him of a deer caught in headlights. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Jake called out, keeping his distance so he wouldn't scare her more. "I'm a paramedic. Do you need help?" The woman took a step backward, nearly losing her balance. Jake could see now that her feet were cut and bleeding, leaving small dark spots on the asphalt. Her long brown hair was tangled and messy, and there were streaks of mud across her face and arms. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please don't call the police." Jake raised his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm not calling anyone unless you want me to. But you're hurt, and it's dangerous out here on the highway. Let me at least take a look at those cuts on your feet." The woman looked around nervously, as if expecting someone to jump out of the darkness at any moment. A car passed by, its headlights briefly illuminating both of them, and Jake noticed how she instinctively tried to hide behind his truck. "What's your name?" Jake asked gently. "Amy," she said after a long pause. "My name is Amy." "Okay, Amy, I'm Jake. I just got off work from the hospital, and I know you're scared, but those cuts look bad. If you don't get them cleaned up, they could get infected." Amy looked down at her feet as if seeing the blood for the first time. She seemed to be in shock, which Jake had seen many times in his work. People in traumatic situations often didn't realize how badly they were hurt. "I need to get away from here," Amy said, looking back down the road behind her. "He'll come looking for me. He has people everywhere." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool night air. In his 8 years as a paramedic, he'd responded to enough domestic violence calls to recognize the signs. The fear in Amy's voice, the way she kept looking over her shoulder, the fact that she was running in a wedding dress, it all painted a picture he'd seen too many times before. "Who's looking for you, Amy?" Jake asked carefully. Amy shook her head quickly. I can't tell you. You don't understand. If he finds out you helped me, he'll hurt you too. He has money, connections. People are afraid of him." Another car approached from the direction Amy had come from, and she immediately crouched down behind Jake's truck, her whole body trembling. The car slowed down as it passed them, and Jake could see the driver looking their way. After it disappeared into the night, Amy slowly stood up again. "Please," she begged, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. "I just need to get somewhere safe. Somewhere he can't find me." Jake looked at this young woman who was clearly running from something terrible, and he made a decision that would change both their lives. He'd always been the type of person who couldn't walk away from someone who needed help. It's what made him good at his job, but sometimes it got him into situations he hadn't planned for. "Okay," Jake said, "but first let me clean up those cuts. I have a first aid kit in my truck." Amy hesitated, then nodded. Jake went to his truck and pulled out his medical supplies. As he knelt down to examine her feet, he could see the cuts were deep and full of gravel and dirt from the road. "This is going to sting a little," Jake warned as he began cleaning the wounds. Amy winced but didn't pull away. "How long have you been walking?" "Hours," Amy said quietly. "I don't even know how far I've come. I just kept walking until I couldn't anymore." Jake noticed bruises on Amy's arms that were partially hidden by the torn sleeves of her dress. They looked like finger marks, as if someone had grabbed her hard. His jaw tightened with anger, but he kept his voice gentle. "Amy, I know you're scared, and I know you don't know me, but I want you to know that whatever happened to you, whatever you're running from, you don't have to face it alone." Amy looked up at him with surprised eyes, as if kindness was something she wasn't used to receiving. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Jake finished bandaging her feet and sat back on his heels. "Because everyone deserves to be safe. And because I can see that you're a good person who's been hurt by someone who isn't." For the first time since he'd found her, Amy smiled just a little. It was a sad smile, but it was real. "I don't have anywhere to go," she admitted. "I don't have money, and I can't go back to my apartment. He knows where I live." "Then we'll figure something out," Jake said, surprising himself with how quickly he'd made that decision. "But first you need to get off this highway. It's not safe for you to be out here in the open." Jake helped Amy to her feet and opened the passenger door of his truck. She hesitated again, looking at him with uncertainty. "I promise I won't hurt you," Jake said, "and I won't take you anywhere you don't want to go. But Amy, whoever you're running from, they're probably looking for you on this road. We need to get you somewhere safe while we figure out what to do next." Amy took a deep breath and climbed into the truck. As Jake started the engine, she turned to him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means to me." Jake looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror as he pulled back onto the highway. He had so many questions, but he could see that Amy was exhausted and scared. The questions could wait. Right now, the most important thing was getting her somewhere safe. As they drove through the dark night, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than either of them realized. Jake drove in silence for 20 minutes before pulling into the parking lot of a small diner that stayed open all night. The neon sign flickered weakly in the darkness, and only one other car sat in the lot. Amy had been quiet the entire drive, staring out the window with her arms wrapped around herself. "Are you hungry?" Jake asked gently. "When's the last time you ate something?" Amy thought for a moment. "Yesterday morning, I think, before—" She trailed off, not finishing the sentence. Inside the diner, Jake chose a corner booth where Amy could sit with her back to the wall, facing the door. He'd noticed how she kept checking the parking lot through the windows. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes, brought them coffee without being asked. "Rough night?" the waitress asked, looking at Amy's torn dress with concern. "Car trouble," Jake said quickly. "We're waiting for a tow truck." After the waitress left, Amy wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup and took a shaky breath. "I suppose you want to know what happened," she said quietly. "Only if you're ready to tell me," Jake replied. "But Amy, I need to know if you're in immediate danger. If someone's looking for you, I need to know what we're dealing with." Amy looked around the empty diner once more, then began to speak in a voice so low Jake had to lean forward to hear her. "Today was supposed to be my wedding day," she said, "to a man named Vincent Cross. Maybe you've heard of him. He owns half the commercial buildings downtown, some hotels, restaurants. He's worth more money than I could ever count." Jake had heard the name. Vincent Cross was always in the local business news, donating to charities and cutting ribbons at new developments. He seemed like the kind of rich guy who genuinely cared about the community. "I met Vincent 2 years ago at the art gallery where I worked," Amy continued. "He was charming, generous. He bought me expensive gifts, took me to fancy restaurants I never could have afforded. I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world." She paused to sip her coffee, her hand still trembling slightly. "At first, the attention felt wonderful. After my parents died in a car crash 3 years ago, I'd been so lonely. Vincent made me feel special, protected. But slowly things changed. He didn't like me spending time with my friends. He said they were jealous of what we had together. When I kept seeing them anyway, strange things started happening. My friend Lisa got fired from her job for no reason. My friend Beth's landlord suddenly decided not to renew her lease. Jake felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. "He was isolating you," Amy nodded. "I didn't realize it at first. Vincent always had explanations. Coincidences, he called them. Bad luck. But when my best friend Kelly tried to warn me that something wasn't right, she ended up in the hospital after what the police called a random mugging. That's when I started paying closer attention." The waitress returned to refill their coffee, and Amy waited until she was gone before continuing. "Vincent controlled everything. Where I lived, what I wore, where I worked. He got me fired from the gallery and gave me a job at one of his companies instead, where he could watch me all day. He said it was because he wanted to take care of me, but I felt like a prisoner." "Why didn't you leave?" Jake asked, though he already suspected the answer. "I tried," Amy said, her voice barely a whisper. 6 months ago, I packed a bag and went to stay with my cousin in another state. Vincent found me within 2 days. He had hired private investigators to track me down. He brought me back and told everyone I'd had a nervous breakdown from wedding stress. After that, he never left me alone. There was always someone watching. Jake's hands tightened around his coffee cup. What happened today? What made you run? Amy's eyes filled with tears. This morning, before the ceremony, I overheard Vincent on the phone in his study. He was talking to someone about a journalist named Robert Chen, who'd been asking questions about Vincent's business deals. Vincent was angry, saying that Chen was getting too close to something and needed to be handled permanently. Jake's blood ran cold. What do you think he meant? I knew what he meant, Amy said. Over the past few months, I'd started noticing things. Documents left out on Vincent's desk, phone calls he thought I couldn't hear. Vincent wasn't just a successful businessman. He was buying properties from families for far less than they were worth by threatening them, sometimes having their businesses vandalized until they were desperate enough to sell. The money he was donating to charity was coming from destroying people's lives. Amy wiped her eyes with a napkin. When I heard him talking about Robert Chen, I knew I couldn't marry him. I couldn't be part of what he was doing. But when I tried to back out of the wedding, Vincent grabbed me hard enough to leave bruises. He told me I knew too much to just walk away. He said after we were married I'd be his wife, and wives can't testify against their husbands in court. Jake shook his head in disbelief. So you ran. During the ceremony, while everyone was waiting for me to walk down the aisle, I climbed out of the bathroom window in my wedding dress. I ran through the woods behind the church until I reached the highway. I've been walking ever since. As Amy finished her story, Jake's phone buzzed with a text message. Then another. Then his phone started ringing. The caller ID showed his supervisor at the hospital. I should take this, Jake said apologetically, stepping outside the diner. Jake, where are you? His supervisor asked immediately. There are people here asking about you. They say you might have picked up a woman who's having mental health problems and could be dangerous. Jake's heart started pounding. What people? Private investigators, they said. They're working with the family of some woman who had a breakdown and ran away from her wedding. They seem to think you might have seen her or picked her up on your way home from work. Through the diner window, Jake could see Amy hunched over her coffee cup, looking small and scared in her torn wedding dress. She didn't look dangerous. She looked like someone who had been through hell and was still running from it. I haven't seen anyone, Jake lied, surprising himself. I drove straight home after my shift. Okay, but Jake, if you do see this woman, they want you to call them immediately. They're offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to her safe return. They're really worried about her. After hanging up, Jake stood in the parking lot for a moment thinking. $50,000 was more money than he'd see in a year as a paramedic. But something about the whole situation felt wrong. If Amy was just having a breakdown, why were private investigators involved instead of police? Why had they tracked down every paramedic who'd worked his shift? Jake walked back into the diner and sat down across from Amy. We have a problem, he said quietly. Vincent's people are already looking for you. They've talked to my work, and they're probably checking with every hospital, gas station, and business along this highway. Amy's face went pale. I knew this would happen. I should never have let you help me. Now you're in danger too. Jake leaned forward and looked Amy directly in the eyes. Amy, I need you to tell me the truth. Do you have any proof of what Vincent's been doing? Any evidence of the illegal business deals or the threats? Amy hesitated, then nodded slowly. Before the wedding, I made copies of some documents I found in his study. Phone records, bank statements, contracts with fake names. I hid them in a safety deposit box at First National Bank downtown. I was going to take them to the police after we came back from our honeymoon. Jake made a decision that would change everything. Then that's what we're going to do. But first, we need to disappear completely. Vincent's people are looking for you on this highway, and they're already asking questions about me. We need to get somewhere they'll never think to look. Where can we possibly go that Vincent won't find us? Amy asked. Jake smiled grimly. I know a place. But Amy, once we do this, there's no going back. We'll both be fugitives until we can get that evidence to the right people. Amy looked at Jake for a long moment, then nodded. I'm ready. I can't run forever, and I can't let Vincent hurt anyone else. As they left the diner, neither of them noticed the car that had been parked across the street, or the man inside taking pictures with a telephoto lens. Jake helped Amy back into his truck, but instead of starting the engine immediately, he sat quietly for a moment thinking. Something felt wrong about the parking lot. It was too quiet, and he'd noticed the same dark sedan parked across the street when they'd arrived at the diner. Amy, he said quietly, don't look behind us, but I think we might be being watched. When I start the truck, Keep your head down and don't turn around." Amy's face went pale, but she nodded and slumped lower in her seat. Jake started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, keeping his speed normal so he wouldn't attract attention. In his rearview mirror, he watched the sedan's headlights come on and pull out behind them. "They're following us," Jake said, his heart starting to race. "Hold on." Instead of heading toward the main highway, Jake turned down a side road he knew well from years of emergency calls. It led to an old industrial area with lots of twists and turns. Behind them, the sedan struggled to keep up without getting too close. Jake knew these roads better than whoever was following them. After 10 minutes of winding through empty streets, Jake was confident they'd lost their tail. He drove for another 20 minutes before finally stopping at what looked like an abandoned gas station on the edge of town. "Where are we?" Amy asked, looking around at the empty building with boarded-up windows. "My uncle owns this place," Jake explained. "He's been trying to sell it for years, but nobody wants to buy it. We can switch cars here." Behind the old station was a garage where Jake's uncle stored old vehicles he was fixing up to sell. Jake knew where the spare key was hidden, and within minutes they were transferring their few belongings to a beat-up pickup truck that looked like it had seen better days. "It's not pretty, but it runs good," Jake said as they drove away from the station. "And more importantly, nobody's looking for this truck." As they drove through the dark countryside, Amy finally asked the question that had been bothering her. "Jake, why are you doing this? You don't even know me. You could get in serious trouble for helping me." Jake was quiet for a moment, focusing on the winding mountain road ahead of them. 3 years ago, I had a younger sister named Katie. She was dating this guy who seemed nice at first, but then he started controlling everything she did. Telling her what to wear, who she could talk to, checking her phone all the time. Amy could hear the pain in Jake's voice and knew this story didn't have a happy ending. "I tried to talk to Katie about it," Jake continued, "but she always defended him, said he was just protective because he loved her." "Sound familiar?" Amy nodded sadly. "Vincent used to say the exact same thing. One night Katie called me crying. She said her boyfriend had hurt her and she wanted to leave him. I told her to pack a bag and I'd come get her. But by the time I got to her apartment, she'd changed her mind. Said it was just a misunderstanding, that she'd overreacted." Jake's hands tightened on the steering wheel. 2 weeks later, Katie ended up in the hospital with a broken arm and a concussion. Her boyfriend claimed she'd fallen down the stairs, and Katie backed up his story. "The doctors and I knew better, but we couldn't prove anything." "What happened to her?" Amy asked softly. "She stayed with him for another 6 months. During that time, I barely saw her. He'd convinced her that I didn't approve of their relationship and was trying to break them up. When she finally tried to leave him for good," Jake's voice broke slightly, "let's just say she didn't make it out alive." Amy reached over and gently touched Jake's arm. "I'm so sorry. After Katie died, I threw myself into my work. Every domestic violence call, every abuse case that came through the hospital, I saw my sister's face. I swore I'd never stand by and do nothing again when someone needed help." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, winding higher into the mountains. Finally, Jake turned off onto a dirt road that was barely visible in the darkness. "My grandmother left me a cabin up here when she passed away last year," Jake explained as they bumped along the rough road. "It's not on any official maps, and the only way to find it is if you know exactly where to look. We'll be safe here while we figure out our next move." The cabin was small but cozy, with a stone fireplace and simple furniture. Jake got a fire going while Amy explored the single bedroom and tiny kitchen. For the first time since running away, Amy felt like she could breathe freely. "There's no cell phone service up here," Jake said, "which means Vincent's people can't track us through our phones. But it also means we're completely cut off from the outside world." Over the next few days, Amy and Jake settled into a routine. Jake taught Amy how to chop firewood and catch fish in the small stream behind the cabin. Amy helped Jake understand more about Vincent's business dealings, drawing diagrams and timelines of everything she'd observed over the past 2 years. "Vincent has 3 main ways he forces people to sell their properties," Amy explained one evening as they sat by the fire. "First, he has businesses in the area vandalized or robbed until the owners can't afford to keep them open. Second, he uses his connections at the bank to make it impossible for people to get loans or refinance their mortgages. Third, he has city inspectors find violations that require expensive repairs." Jake shook his head in amazement. "And nobody's ever caught on to the pattern?" "He's very careful to spread it out over different neighborhoods and different time periods," Amy said. Plus, he donates so much money to local charities and political campaigns that most people see him as a pillar of the community. Who would believe that Vincent Cross, the man who built the new children's wing at the hospital, would threaten families to steal their homes? But you have proof of all this? Amy nodded. Bank records, phone logs, contracts with fake names, payments to people who did the vandalism. It's all in that safety deposit box downtown. The problem is getting to it without Vincent's people catching us. Jake had been thinking about this problem for days. I have an idea, but it's risky. My cousin Danny works security at First National Bank. He owes me a favor from when I helped him get clean after his drug problems. Maybe he could help us get in and out without being seen. But what if it's a trap? Amy asked. What if Vincent has people watching the bank? Then we'll have to be smarter than them, Jake said. But Amy, we can't hide up here forever. Eventually, Vincent's people will expand their search to include places like this. And even if they don't find us, what kind of life is that? Always looking over your shoulder, never being able to go home or see friends again? Amy stared into the fire, watching the flames dance in the darkness. You're right. I can't let Vincent keep hurting people while I hide in the mountains. And I can't let him hurt you because you helped me. He's not going to hurt either of us, Jake said firmly. We're going to expose him for what he really is. But we need that evidence first. When do we go? Amy asked. Jake looked at her with admiration. Despite everything she'd been through, Amy was ready to face her fears to stop Vincent from hurting others. Tomorrow night. Danny works the late shift on Wednesdays, and there are fewer people around the bank after business hours. That night, as Amy slept in the cabin's single bed and Jake made himself comfortable on the couch, both of them knew their peaceful time in the mountains was about to end. Tomorrow they would head back into Vincent's territory, and everything would depend on their ability to outsmart a man who had unlimited resources and no conscience. Outside the cabin, an owl called through the darkness, and Jake found himself hoping it wasn't an omen of things to come. Jake woke up before dawn on Wednesday morning with a knot in his stomach. Today was the day they would leave the safety of the mountains and walk back into Vincent's world. Amy was already awake, sitting by the window and watching the sun rise through the trees. Having second thoughts? Jake asked as he joined her with 2 cups of coffee. A million of them, Amy admitted. But I keep thinking about what you said. We can't hide forever. And Vincent won't stop hurting people just because I'm gone. If anything, he might get worse to prove a point. Jake had called his cousin Danny from a payphone in a small town at the bottom of the mountain the day before. Danny had agreed to help, but Jake could hear the nervousness in his voice. Vincent Cross was not someone you wanted as an enemy. Danny will create a distraction around 8 o'clock tonight, Jake explained as they drove down the mountain in the old pickup truck. He'll trigger the fire alarm in the building next door to the bank. While everyone's focused on that, we'll slip in through the service entrance that Danny will leave unlocked. What if Vincent has people watching the bank? Amy asked for the 100th time. Then we'll have to be faster and smarter than them, Jake said, though he was worried about the same thing. They spent the day at a shopping mall in a town 30 miles from the city, trying to blend in with the crowds while staying alert for anyone who might be following them. Jake bought a cheap baseball cap and sunglasses, while Amy found a simple dress and cardigan to replace the torn wedding gown she'd finally thrown away. As evening approached, they made their way back toward the city. Jake parked the truck in a residential neighborhood 6 blocks from the bank, and they walked the rest of the way through back alleys and side streets. There, Jake whispered as they crouched behind a dumpster across from First National Bank. Danny's car in the security lot. He's working tonight, like he said. The bank looked quiet, with only a few lights on in the upper floors where the overnight cleaning crew worked. But Amy spotted something that made her blood run cold. Jake, she whispered urgently. That black car parked across the street. I've seen it before. Vincent's head of security drives one just like it. Jake squinted through the darkness. The car looked empty, but that didn't mean no one was watching. Maybe it's just a coincidence, he said, not believing it himself. At exactly 8 o'clock, they heard fire trucks in the distance. Within minutes, sirens were wailing and emergency vehicles were surrounding the office building next to the bank. People began pouring out of nearby buildings, and even the security guards from the bank stepped outside to see what was happening. This is our chance, Jake said. Danny said he'd unlock the service door when the alarm goes off. They moved quickly but carefully through the chaos, slipping around to the back of the bank building. The service door was indeed unlocked, and they found themselves in a maintenance corridor, that led to the main banking floor. Danny was waiting for them, looking nervous and checking his watch constantly. "You've got maybe 10 minutes before the fire department clears the scene next door and everyone comes back inside," he said. Amy led them to the safety deposit box area, her hands shaking as she inserted her key. Inside the small metal box were manila folders full of documents, photographs, and computer disks. "This is it," Amy said, stuffing everything into a backpack Jake had brought. Bank statements showing payments to fake companies, photos of Vincent meeting with known criminals, recordings I made of his phone conversations. Just as they were about to leave, Danny's radio crackled with a message from the main security desk. "Danny, we've got a problem. There are 3 men in expensive suits asking questions about whether anyone matching the description of that missing woman has been here today." Danny looked at Jake and Amy with panic in his eyes. "Vincent's people are in the building. They're asking the front desk guard about you." "Is there another way out?" Jake asked quickly. "Loading dock in the basement," Danny said, "but you'll have to go through the main banking floor to get to the stairs." They could hear voices getting closer as Vincent's security team searched the building. Jake grabbed Amy's hand and they ran toward the stairwell, but as they reached the main floor, they saw flashlights sweeping through the darkness. "This way," Amy whispered, pulling Jake behind the teller counter. They crawled along the floor, staying low as the beam of a flashlight passed over their heads. "I know you're in here," a man's voice called out. It was cold and threatening. "Mr. Cross just wants to talk to his fiancée. No one needs to get hurt." Jake and Amy reached the stairwell and started down toward the basement, but their footsteps echoed in the empty stairwell. Behind them, they heard the men running toward the sound. "There!" someone shouted. "They're going downstairs." Jake and Amy ran as fast as they could through the basement corridor, the backpack full of evidence bouncing against Amy's back. Behind them, heavy footsteps thundered down the stairs. The loading dock was at the end of a long hallway lined with storage rooms. As they reached the door, Jake realized it was locked with an electronic keypad. "Danny didn't give us the code for this door," Jake said, frantically trying different combinations. The footsteps were getting closer. Amy could hear the men talking on their radios, calling for backup and reporting their location to Vincent. "Wait," Amy said, remembering something. "Vincent's birthday. He uses it for everything." She quickly punched in the numbers and the lock clicked open. They burst through the door into the cool night air, but their relief was short-lived. Parked directly in front of the loading dock were 2 black SUVs with their engines running. Vincent Cross stepped out of the nearest vehicle, flanked by 4 large men in dark suits. "Hello, Amy," Vincent said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I've been so worried about you. Everyone's been looking everywhere." Amy instinctively moved closer to Jake, who stepped protectively in front of her. "She doesn't want to talk to you, Vincent," Jake said. Vincent laughed, but it was a cold sound. "And you must be the paramedic who's been helping my unstable fiancé. I'm afraid Amy's been filling your head with some very wild stories. She's been under a lot of stress lately." "I'm not going back with you," Amy said, finding her voice. "And I'm not crazy. I know exactly what you've been doing to those families." Vincent's smile disappeared. "Amy, you're confused. The stress of planning our wedding has been too much for you. But don't worry, I have doctors who can help you feel better." One of Vincent's men took a step toward Amy and Jake, but Jake held up his hand. "Before you do something you'll regret, you should know that we've already made copies of everything Amy found in your study. Documents, recordings, bank statements, it's all been sent to people who know exactly what to do with it." It was a bluff, but Jake said it with such confidence that Vincent hesitated. "You're lying, am I?" Jake asked. "Are you willing to bet your entire empire on that?" For a moment nobody moved. Then Vincent nodded to his men and they started moving forward again. But just as the situation seemed hopeless, police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer by the second. "Boss," one of Vincent's men said urgently, "we need to go now." Vincent's eyes blazed with anger as he looked at Amy. "This isn't over," he said. "You belong to me and I always get what's mine." As the police cars turned into the alley, Vincent and his men quickly got into their SUVs and drove away. Jake and Amy stood in the loading dock holding each other and shaking, both knowing that while they'd escaped this time, Vincent wasn't the type of man who gave up easily. The police officers who responded to the disturbance at the bank were surprisingly understanding when Jake and Amy explained their situation. Officer Rodriguez, a veteran cop with kind eyes, listened carefully as Amy told her story and showed him some of the documents from the backpack. "Ma'am, these are some serious allegations you're making," Rodriguez said. "Vincent Cross is a well-known businessman in this city. Do you really have proof of what you're saying?" Amy spread out the bank statements, photographs, and transcripts on the hood of the police car. Even in the dim light of the alley, Rodriguez could see that the evidence was extensive and detailed. "We need to get this to someone who can't be bought or intimidated," Jake said. "Vincent has connections everywhere in this city." Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "I know someone. Detective Lieutenant Hayes runs the State Corruption Task Force. She's been investigating organized crime connections in the business community for years. She's straight as an arrow, and Vincent Cross doesn't have any influence over her." 3 hours later, Jake and Amy found themselves in a secure conference room at the state police headquarters, telling their story to Detective Hayes and 2 FBI agents who had been called in to assist. Hayes was a tough-looking woman in her 50s who had clearly seen it all during her career. "This is impressive work," Hayes said as she examined the evidence. Bank records showing payments to shell companies, recordings of phone conversations discussing illegal activities, photographs of meetings with known criminals. "How did you manage to collect all this without Vincent knowing?" Amy explained how she had gradually become suspicious of Vincent's activities and had started making copies of documents when he wasn't around. "He trusted me completely because he thought I was just a naive girl who only cared about pretty dresses and fancy dinners. He never imagined I was paying attention to his business dealings. The problem," said FBI Agent Collins, "is that Vincent Cross has been very careful. Most of these documents don't have his name directly on them. His lawyers will claim he had no knowledge of what his employees were doing." Amy smiled for the first time in days. "That's why I saved the best evidence for last." She pulled out a small digital recorder from the bottom of the backpack. 3 weeks ago, I recorded a phone conversation where Vincent personally ordered the vandalism of Rodriguez Family Market. The owners were refusing to sell their building, so Vincent told his people to make them understand that keeping their business wasn't worth the trouble. Detective Hayes played the recording, and Vincent's voice filled the room, cold and calculating as he discussed destroying a family's livelihood. "That's his voice, no question," Collins said. "This recording alone could put him away for years, but building a case against someone with Vincent's resources wasn't simple." Hayes explained that they would need to move carefully and quickly. "Vincent has lawyers, political connections, and enough money to disappear if he thinks we're closing in. We need to coordinate arrests of his entire organization at the same time." Over the next 2 days, Jake and Amy stayed in protective custody while the task force built their case. Amy provided detailed information about Vincent's associates, his business operations, and his daily routine. Jake helped by identifying some of Vincent's victims, families he had treated during emergency calls who had been hurt during the random crimes Vincent had orchestrated. On Friday morning, Detective Hayes came to see them with news. "We're moving today," she said. "Vincent is scheduled to attend a charity luncheon at the Riverside Hotel. He'll be in public with lots of witnesses, so he won't be able to run or resist arrest." Jake and Amy watched the news coverage from their safe house. The reporter stood outside the elegant hotel as FBI agents led Vincent Cross away in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled and his usually perfect hair disheveled. Vincent Cross, prominent businessman and philanthropist, was arrested this morning on charges including extortion, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and fraud, the reporter announced. Federal agents also arrested 12 associates in coordinated raids across the city. Amy felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. For 2 years she had lived in fear of this man, and now he was the one who looked afraid. The trials took 8 months. Amy testified for 3 days, telling the court about Vincent's controlling behavior, his threats, and what she had witnessed of his criminal activities. The hardest part was facing Vincent in the courtroom, but Jake was there every day, giving her strength with his quiet presence. Jake also testified, describing how he had found Amy on the highway and what she had told him about Vincent's crimes. The defense attorneys tried to discredit both of them, claiming Amy was a vindictive ex-fiancé and Jake was a nobody seeking attention, but the evidence spoke for itself. The recordings, documents, and bank statements painted a clear picture of a criminal organization that had terrorized dozens of families. One by one, Vincent's victims took the stand to tell their stories. Mrs. Rodriguez, whose family market had been vandalized repeatedly until they were forced to sell. The Johnson family, whose restaurant had been destroyed by a mysterious fire after they refused Vincent's lowball offer. Small business owners who had been driven to bankruptcy by Vincent's schemes. When the verdict came down, Vincent was found guilty on 17 different charges. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. "Mr. Cross," the judge said, looking directly at Vincent, "you used your wealth and influence not to help your community, but to prey upon the most vulnerable members of it. The families you destroyed trusted you, and you betrayed that trust for profit. This court hopes that your sentence serves as a warning to others who would abuse their power in similar ways." After the trial, Jake and Amy found themselves back at the small diner, where they had shared coffee on that first terrifying night. So much had changed since then, but the diner looked exactly the same. "So what happens now?" Amy asked, stirring her coffee absently. "Well," Jake said, "I was thinking maybe we could start over, both of us. I've been accepted to law school. Turns out helping to bring down a criminal organization looks good on applications. I want to help other people the way Detective Hayes helped us." Amy smiled. "I've been thinking about that too. There's a nonprofit that helps domestic violence victims rebuild their lives. They offered me a job helping other women who are trying to escape dangerous relationships. Sounds like we both found our calling," Jake said. "And each other," Amy added quietly. Jake reached across the table and took her hand. "Amy, I know we've been through something incredible together, and I don't want to assume anything. But I'd like to find out what we could be when we're not running for our lives." Amy squeezed his hand. "I'd like that too. But Jake, I need time. 2 years with Vincent. I need to remember who I am when I'm not afraid." "I'll wait as long as you need," Jake said. "We've got all the time in the world now." 6 months later, Jake and Amy met again at the same diner. This time Amy wore a simple blue dress and a smile that reached her eyes. Jake had started his first semester of law school and was working part-time at the hospital. "How's the new job?" Jake asked. "Amazing," Amy said. "Last week I helped a woman named Carol leave her abusive husband. She reminded me so much of myself 2 years ago. Scared, isolated, convinced she had nowhere to go. But now she's safe and her kids are safe and she's starting to believe in herself again." Jake smiled. "And how are you doing, really?" Amy thought for a moment. "I'm good, Jake. For the first time in years, I'm actually good. I'm not looking over my shoulder anymore. I'm not afraid. I'm free." As they left the diner that night, walking hand in hand under the streetlights, Amy thought about how different her life had become. She had gone from a runaway bride in a torn dress to a woman with purpose, surrounded by people who cared about her. Sometimes, she reflected, the most beautiful new beginnings start with the courage to run toward something better, even when you can't see what's waiting for you in the darkness.